Hello everybody, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. So I think, to be fair, we've been incredibly lucky at Engine. For the past 17 years, we've been working with billion-dollar businesses throughout the world on a really, really broad variety of projects. And in that time, we've learned a lot about how to get things done inside complex organizations, and also we've learned about the things that we really shouldn't do. And I want to kind of share some of that stuff with you today. Over the last 17 years, we have seen organizations try all sorts of things to get a commercial advantage. We've seen them increase their marketing spend. We've seen them focus very much on operational efficiency. We've seen them try to digitally transform themselves. But it now feels as if they are reaching the limits of what's possible by focusing on efficiency and technology alone. And despite that, or as a result of that, what they're realizing is that the original questions, the important questions, remain. What do customers really want? What will make them buy? And how do we go about getting more of the right things to market faster? And that's what I want to talk to you about today, because we're seeing that organizations are realizing they need to have a fundamentally different approach to doing things and a different mindset, which is not only about getting a sort of technically correct product development cycle, but it's also about looking at how the organization actually needs to change in order to deliver things. So really, they're moving from what's essentially a management approach, which at its heart is about technology, technology-led, marketing-led, resource-led, and they're moving to an approach which is much more about being customer-inspired and vision-led. It's an approach that's far faster paced and it's much more experimental. It engages and it excites and inspires people within the business as they move through the process. And it's an approach that goes from insights to creating service propositions. From propositions, it informs the design of experiences, and from experiences, it informs the capabilities that the organization needs to deliver. Now, I don't know about you, but actually, when you kind of go through that, you realize, actually, this is a design process. And it's about this idea of design-led change. So organizations are realizing they need to move from just focusing on getting a product development cycle right to inspiring an organization to both invest, implement, sell, and brilliantly support the things they want to put out there into the market. Now, at the heart of this approach are 7 competencies that we've recognized. And I want to talk to you about these today because essentially they are competencies that designers have, and designers can help organizations to build themselves and excel at, because they're vital to them. So the very first competency is this idea of a compelling vision. Now, creating compelling visions is a very designerly thing to do. We can all do that. We know that organizations can be incredibly complex and interconnected. They have massive to-do lists of things they have to work through. They're full of really, really smart and capable people who are not short of having great ideas. The challenge is, without a compelling vision, no one really sees the big picture. Everybody tends to see things from their own perspective. As the saying goes, if you ask a butcher what to have for dinner, don't be surprised if he says meat. So in this situation where everybody is kind of seeing it from their own perspective, what happens is things become unaligned. The organization becomes introspective. People begin to compete for resources because they think their project is more important than somebody else's, and the organizations become very, very inside out. What they need is this compelling vision, this single, motivating, central idea that everybody can get behind, understand, can interpret it, and see it in the fidelity that they need in order to align themselves and have a very clear roadmap and track laid out in front of them for them to deliver against. So let me give you an example of this. For this company, it's a compelling vision. It's this idea of home for success. You probably haven't heard of this vision at all, but let me explain where it comes from. There's an organization, or a very big business back in the UK called Unite Students. They're essentially a property developer and a landlord, but they focus on student accommodation. Now, using design, they began to explore what their customers, who are essentially students, what was going on in their world. And they found out, which seems obvious to you and I, that actually students are at a really weird point in their lives. They're kind of going to university, they're leaving home for the very, very first time, they're anxious, all the simple things that you and I know how to do, mum and dad used to do that, that's really, really awkward for them. So they are both excited and they're anxious. They want to live the dream, they want to kind of do well at university, but they're concerned about how much it's going to cost. They're concerned that if I actually get this great qualification, will I actually get a job at the end of it? Will I make friends? Will I get on well? What students need, which is manifested in the vision for Unite, is this idea of creating not just a property, but a home for success, a place for these students to really, really excel in, one where the business prioritizes their social development, their academic success, their financial security, their emotional security above all else. Now, this big vision has landed in that organization like free pizza at a party. Everybody loves it. They want it. They can't have enough of it. Why? Because it resonates with them as individuals, remembering when they were going through university, but also for those people who have kids that are going through university, they're realizing how important this is to them. So this vision is there, and it's helped them to do a whole bunch of things. Compelling visions fundamentally help organizations to get much better at planning their resources, understanding what they need to do and what they require. It leads to transformational levels of investment because they can go out there and make a case. They can go out to the institutions and fundraise, talking about what their big ambitions are. It actually inspires people to change because they can see something that they believe that they can make happen and make right in the world. It creates traction within the organization, shows that we're actually moving forward. Again, that helps with investment. But most importantly, it actually motivates people to really, really deliver against this vision. Okay, that was the first one. Second one, beautiful design. Now, we know, sadly, this is true, that beautiful people get hired sooner, get promoted sooner, and get paid more than the rest of us. So hands up if that's you. Don't be shy. Ah, yeah, definitely. Definitely you two, that's for sure. But actually, the same, sadly, is true inside organizations. That actually, beautiful projects get kicked off sooner, they get ahead, and they generally get more funding. Now, of course, when we talk about beauty, when we talk about it in our world, we sort of understand what beauty is all about. It's something that appeals to our senses. It looks good, it smells good, it makes us feel good. So it's quite complex. But beauty and how it appeals to the senses of an organization is actually much more simpler. It actually comes down, at the end of the day, to money. And there is essentially a beauty checklist that we must be aware of in terms of that. So the first thing there, from an organizational point of view, something's beautiful if it actually costs less to create. So design-led approaches help organizations to get things right first time because they're customer-inspired, they're co-created, we prototype, we make sure that there aren't any sort of bugs in the system, and the process engages people, so it makes sure that actually we don't waste money when we're creating it. It actually costs less to market, and that makes it beautiful too, because when you create a proposition that gives people a positive emotional experience, they're going to share that. They're going to tell their friends and families about those things. And when the service you're developing is intrinsically branded of the brand, you don't require to spend the same amounts in terms of communications around that. So getting something well-crafted, well-designed ensures that it costs less to market. The third thing is about cost to deliver. Now, when you engage in a design process and you start crafting the experience and the service against the real constraints the organization faces, technology, the commercial reality, the complexity of the organization, what you end up with is creating a far more elegant solution that works within that organization and is easier to deliver. And the fourth thing is fundamentally, again, about good design. If you create something with broad appeal, that fits for everybody, regardless of their age or any impairments that they might have. Essentially, you broaden the potential market and you increase the number of people who are going to potentially buy that idea. So all of those things come together and make something beautiful in the eyes of an organization, and particularly to the cold reptilian hearts of commercial organizations. So that's the second one. The third one is this idea of creating a clear case for what you're doing. Now, you can't get anything through any organization unless the key stakeholders are really happy and confident with your idea and you're sure that it meets all of the right requirements. What you don't want to do in this situation is try to engage in a set of, really hardcore set-piece sign-off sessions. What you do want to have is a much more collaborative, cross-functional, design-led approach to case-making that runs throughout the project, from the very, very start to the very, very finish. It begins with creating what we refer to as this value hypothesis. You sit down with the stakeholders, you discuss with them what they're trying to achieve, and you begin to paint a picture about the value of this thing. But not only do you think about it from a cost point of view, you think about it from some of the softer benefits, about positive brand perception, about how it will appeal to employees, around how it will appeal to our partners. You then make sure that you apply evidence to the vision that you're creating. So going back to Unite students and the design research they did to understand the real situation that students face and the anxieties that they have and their desire to want to succeed. But case-making needs to be continual throughout the whole process. You need to engage that cross-functional team of experts to substantiate the thinking as you go through. You need to remain very, very agile in your approaches, test and learn and develop continually. This design-led approach builds consensus in the organization. It removes heat from the big decisions that have to be taken, and it frames things from a total benefits case perspective, which is critical to reassure decision makers and allow them to endorse and for the project to actually proceed. Now here's a really sad fact. Unfortunately, according to Accenture, 48% of R&D budgets are wasted. And they're wasted primarily for two reasons. One, it's about poor customer insight. And secondly, it's about taking too long to get to market, so slow to market times. And we know that when you're trying to get something to market, it has to pass through the hands of lots of different people within that organization who all want to sort of see it and shape it in their own particular way. And this creates a lot of erosion with the idea. Now, at best, it might just blunt the impact of the idea that you're trying to launch, but at worst, it could lead to the complete market failure of that idea. So, design-led approaches, now these are ones obviously that are customer-centered, they're much more collaborative, they're much more iterative, ensures that actually the visions you're creating are far more informed, they're compellingly communicated, and they're broadly supported within the organization. From a design point of view, there are three things we need to focus on. First is this idea of making sure that we create well-crafted design packages. What I mean by this is the things like the blueprints, the master plans, the guidelines that we're creating, have enough detail in them to make sure that the subsequent roadmaps and programs of work and the organizational collaboration plans necessary to make something happen can all be well aligned. It's critical to make things tangible as soon as possible through, obviously, things like journey maps and through prototyping to begin to understand what the problems might be down the road and to eradicate those as we go forward. And then, critically, it's about the role of the designer, moving from not just about crafting touch points, but actually about translating the experience into a set of capabilities that the organization needs to create. And I think this is one of the most fundamental things that designers need to learn to do, moving from crafting touch points to actually designing organizational capabilities. And it's one of the biggest impacts that we can have. Right, number 5, right conditions. As we know, great services come from great organizations. And in order to deliver a multi-channel service experience, that needs to touch loads of people within the organization, go across teams, and the enablers to deliver that are going to touch people, processes, systems, technology, etc. It's very, very broad. What we've found in our experience, what you need to have are essentially a group of people that John Cotter, the leadership professor, refers to as a guiding coalition within an organization who are sufficiently engaged, motivated, and excited and aligned behind the purpose of the project and the desired outcome to get out there and begin to engage their networks to make this thing happen. In small organizations, that can just be a few people. In large organizations, that might be 50 or 100 people. But you have to get this guiding coalition behind you to make things happen. You also have to realize that you need to innovate not just the proposition that you're creating, but also you have to innovate the process that you're going through to design and develop your and develop what you're trying to deliver. And what we have found is that often not enough time is spent within the organization on designing the process and being clear about how this is going to be different to the ways that we do things today. So you've got to design the process properly. You've got to scope out what's required. You've got to understand what the dependencies are on the project. You've got to really start to manage the organization's expectations about what's going to happen. And most importantly, with this new process that you're innovating, you have to negotiate around the ownership of this new process and the governance and who's in charge of it. And you need to continually reiterate this as you go through the process because without it, corporate inertia reexerts itself, and very quickly people kind of drop back into the day-to-day way of working, and they go, they sort of make decisions in the same way, they evaluate things in the same way, they run meetings in the same way. So often you'll go in there as designers, and you'll have a great engagement with somebody, all fun and exciting and energizing, and great stuff will come out. But unless you can find ways to perpetuate that, it will slow down, it'll go back to business as usual, and then basically the ideas will wither and die on the vine. Okay, now, it's a very small number, but 3.5 happens to be a very important number when getting more of the right things to market faster. Funnily enough, organizations that have very engaged employees have their share price is 3.5 times greater than those that don't. Engaged employees are 3.5 times more likely to solve problems and invest personal time in sorting those things out. They also have far less time off than anybody else. Guess how many days off they have on average? 3.5. And also, funnily, they're 3.5 times more likely to be thriving in their lives. So it's great, Get engaged with things, and lots of good things happen to you. But the simple point is that engaging projects motivate people, and there's no greater way of getting something through an organization quickly than getting people excited and engaged in the whole thing. So basically, the success of your project is directly proportional to the amount of engagement and enjoyment and excitement that people have around what's going on. So obviously, you have the basics there. You have to have the right people, the right processes. You have to have the right purpose, so they all know why they're doing that, and that makes it easier. But with these fundamental things in place, where the enjoyment comes from is in, and what design brings to these organizations, the enjoyment comes from the originality of the tasks. It comes from the new skills that people pick up as they are part of a design process, and frankly, having fun, because we understand that design is a very, very social activity, and we understand how to make it good fun. And all of this enjoyment comes from, as I say, the design process. So when you speak to people who come across the design process for the first time and are part of it as it's always happening within service design projects, they tell you about how exciting the process is, how unlike it's anything that they've ever done before, how magical it is. They're really sort of fascinated by how these ideas are created and we make sense of things. When we work to co-create with our clients, we are transferring skills to them. We are giving them confidence to repeat these things going forward. We're building capabilities within them. And we're making that an incredibly social process. We're making connections between them within their organizations that didn't exist before, because we're breaking down the barriers, we're stepping over the silos, and we're bringing it all together. So the design process just naturally makes it a very, very engaging project for people. And we find that there are fundamentally 5 things that come out of engaging projects. The first is this idea of gravity, because essentially an engaging project, an exciting project, seems to have its own gravity. It draws towards it people and resources, which are then yours to play with and use. It makes things far easier for decision makers, because people are volunteering views and opinions. The experts are coming forward. They're beginning to substantiate things. It's not a big decision now, because actually the wisdom of the crowd is suggesting this is the right thing to do. So it becomes much easier for decision makers to move forward with things. It creates a lot more buy-in. More and more people come forward, help out, devote their time to solving it. And this helps to essentially improve the robustness of the idea, because we begin to discover how things might not work, and we can go around fixing it to make sure that it actually does work going forward. But fundamentally, engaging projects then, as the good news kind of goes up within the organization about what's going on, it really unlocks more resources, and it helps to align other projects around your project. So suddenly, the exciting, engaging project, the one that's got everybody, really passionate about, other projects begin to, come into formation behind it and align, the roadmaps begin to, sort themselves out, etc. So it gets resources, it builds confidence within the organization. Now, the final capability is this idea of well-realized outputs. Now, we know when you're talking about a service experience, at the end of the day, from the customer's perspective, it's the quality of the delivery that actually counts, isn't it, after all? That's what you want right at the end of the day. But actually, the same applies to the deliverables within the project, the ones that you are creating on a daily basis. So the project tools, the assets, the communications that you're creating. Because the higher the quality of those things, the greater the confidence the organization has around their content. They become far more effective. People look at them and use them and work with them. And as a result, they speed up time to market. But there's a cheap trick, really, and it's a cheap trick, but it's one that designers are really, really great at. The more rigorous and the more detailed and the better presented the documents and outputs are in a project, what that tends to communicate to the project team is actually that quality and detail is really, really important in this project. And it begins to become like a virus, really, and it manifests itself at the end of the day through the ultimate delivery of the project. So, practice what you preach. If you want a high-quality project, if you want a high-quality delivery at the end, have a high-quality process as you go through. So, better project outputs gain more attention for the project, and they result in the organization having much higher confidence in that project. And more rigor and greater clarity in the deliverables that we're creating translate into a better produced experience at the end of the day. So here we have it. Those 7 competencies that we've found help organizations get more of the right things to market faster. And they should be incredibly familiar to us, because these are essentially design competencies that we are all good at, and we know how to do these things, and we know how to help organizations do these things. And businesses are trying to learn this. They're trying to kind of take this on and get this going. So for us, this is a great thing. We can go out there, we can speak to them, and we can say, we know what you need to do. We can prove that these things are right. Let's show you how we can begin to bring these things to life in your organization. Because fundamentally, as I say, organizations are realizing that they need to move beyond this management approach that's fundamentally technology, marketing, and resource-led, and focus on one that not only has a great product development cycle, but also inspires the organization to invest, to implement, to sell, and to support the idea through and into market. So really, this all wraps up into this idea of design-led change as a way of designers helping organizations get more of the right things to market faster. And that's me. Thank you very much.